Catherine.
Well, according to the New York Times, our next guest was behind the worst hoax in the history of Australian publishing. It was all about this book, The Hand That Signed the Paper. It was written under the pen name Helen Demedenko, a descendant of Ukrainian war criminals with links to the Nazis. It won a bunch of awards before its author was outed as a literary hoax. You see, in reality, Helen Dale was an ordinary Brisbane girl who critics claim faked her ancestry to sell more books. It's a heck of a claim, and Helen Dale is here to chat to us about her new book on Studio 10. Welcome to the show.
Hey. Hi, Helen.
This is a really fascinating backstory behind the book. Take us back to the controversy, and do you regret writing under that pen name?
In some ways I do, in that nobody wants to be deluged with abuse, and that's what happened. And you might hear about on the internet now people being abused, like on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, but in the 90s the internet hadn't kicked off enough for that sort of abuse to happen. So it happened via Australia Post. And there was a period in the mid-90s where my post was being delivered in sacks.
Wow. And you know they're really angry if they're going to sit down, write a letter, take it to the post office, put a stamp on it and post it rather than just fire off a mean tweet.
I became very familiar with what Senator Lionhelm calls the Green Ink Brigade.
Did you read that mail?
At first I did, and then I realised I actually talked to the people who... Publishing companies used to have their publicists in-house. Nowadays, they tend to contract it out. And my publicist actually said, Helen, you have to stop reading it because some of those people are just mad.
Why did you write under this pen name?
I actually thought that the book wouldn't get published unless I did. I thought I would be... I was at university at the time, and you learned... University is this kind of hermetically sealed environment, particularly if you're forced to do a lot of the literary theory subjects. And a big thing in literary theory was then, and it still is now, is that you're not supposed to write about people who aren't of the same background as you. And I thought, no matter how well written this is, no matter how good I am, and all my lecturers were all saying, you're a fantastic writer, you've got heaps of talent, that kind of thing. I didn't discuss this part with them, I admit, but I just thought to myself, no one's going to publish this book.
It's an extraordinary thing, because at the time, of course, everyone thought this is a massive literary fraud, because of the difference between fraud and hoax. And now it seems like with Lionel Shriver, this ridiculous rise of identity politics and campus politics, that you're almost kind of a pioneer.
Yeah.
Was it a literary fraud where you were pretending to be something you weren't, or was it a literary hoax where you were actually trying to pull the wool over the eyes of the establishment and actually reveal the emperor's new clothes, if you like, where you were actually trying to dupe people into falling for it? Because that is why the anger was there, wasn't it? That you made these people look like fools. To some degree, it did turn into a literary hoax, but these days it is... People talk about cultural appropriation, and another news outlet that I did an interview for, they got their news team to do some research, and the news team did find, when they went back through the historical articles about me, some use of the phrase cultural appropriation, but that was rarer. Overwhelmingly, the expression used was literary hoax.
You were the youngest ever winner of the Miles Franklin Award.
Yes,
Do you think if you had written this book with the exact same words but had not said that you had a Ukrainian background, that maybe that award wouldn't have been yours?
I think if there's a step back from that, I believed at the time, and given how much worse this cultural appropriation business has become now, I actually think there wouldn't have been a chance for me to win any awards, because I would have been perceived to be inauthentic. That was a word they tended to use then, inauthentic. Nowadays, that's cultural appropriation. I genuinely believed it wouldn't get published.
So did you just want to get the book published and you're prepared to use a fake name to get it, or did you actually ultimately want to be caught in the end? Did you think sooner or later...
It was more than just a fake name. It was a fake
profile.
Identity, that's right.
Yeah,
fake everything, that's right.
Everything. It was totally fake.
Did you imagine a day when you would eventually go, ha-ha, I fooled you all? Or did you just want to get the book published and you were prepared to do whatever it took to get it published?
It was... I wanted to get my book published. Writers are vain, I'm sorry, we just are. But then it did... I do remember thinking when I was being taught these ridiculous theory subjects, and I had an argument with a tutor when she was criticising Alan Paton's Cry the Beloved Country and saying it was an illegitimate book because it was written by a white South African. And it's the only time I ever, really stood my ground in these tutorials. I tended to just sit there, write what they wanted me to write, and say what they want to be.
Intellectual prostitution.
Yeah, but pretty much. Yeah. But I just remember sitting there thinking, no, I hope this is not going to get you in trouble with Ofcom or whatever it is over here. That's bollocks. This is absolute bollocks. And I just remember probably Helen Demidenko was born in that moment.
But you were obviously such an ambitious writer. And so when you did, you know, win the Miles Franklin and then there was the sacks of mail, did that put you off writing?
It did for quite a long time. And I wanted to have I had an idea for another book set in the period of the Roman Empire because I studied classics as part of my first degree. It wasn't all these silly theory subjects, it was classics, you know, Greek and Latin. And the problem was, and I also had an option in my contract, I was supposed to deliver another book to my publisher, and it had become, The Hand That Signed the Paper, which you have over there, had become a massive bestseller. So, of course, I had become this kind of licence to print money. And I just started to write this Roman-era book, the original one, and it was just terrible. It was just a terrible book, and I gave up at 40,000 words in, which suggests...
Oh, that's halfway,
yes, that's halfway.
Ooh.
Yes, this represents the triumph of hope over experience. And I just gave up, and I'd originally been accepted in to study arts law, and I just went back and became a solicitor, basically. And for a very long time, I was just a lawyer, so I disappeared for ages.
Wow. But now you are back with the historical fiction at the time of Jesus.
Yeah. This one, actually, this is slightly weird. I presume you've got pictures. This is book one that came out in October last year.
Yep.
Book two, which I haven't even physically seen the physical thing yet, I will see it later today, is being launched in Melbourne on Thursday at Embiggen Books, which is, yes, it's a perfectly cromulent word. That is the actual name of the bookstore. It's in Lonsdale Street, Embiggen Books. But I will see today in Melbourne at an event at Melbourne University, book two of Kingdom of the
Was
Wicked.
it hard to get this published? Did you have to claim descendancy from Jesus or, or anything like that?
That's absolute gold. Sorry, I laugh. I make a goose of myself on national television.
It's kind of, I mean, if you get... What I like about this is that you've actually got right up the top here, it's a bit small to see, but it actually says Miles Franklin Literary Award winner. So you're actually claiming the award you won as Helen Demidenko and using it to sell your next book, which is a great sort of...
But they're the same people, Joe.
I just want to say...
There is the thing
and you're going back to Melbourne University where, of course, I think I was actually there at the time when the scandal broke.
Also, this is what the Miles Franklin Trust says that I have to put, my publisher has to put above my name. We were originally going to put something else up there, and the Trust said, no, this is our preferred wording. So we are absolutely following all the rules.
Is that your way of sort of, I guess, thumbing your nose at the establishment? Is it a bit sort of, I'm back, that's right?
Well, I did say in one of the pieces I wrote for the Australian about this, it was sort of like, no, I'm not going to shut up, although I did go away. I don't live in Australia anymore. I live in... I live in the home counties. I've become a sort of terrible stereotype of a Shire Tory, so...
And is there still anger out there towards you? And you're going back to Melbourne University. Was there some
unfortunately, and I think it's early enough in the day to talk about it. I have an event later on today at the Melbourne University Classics Department, and of course classicists are interested in this because it's partly got a Roman setting. So they're not interested in The Hand That Signed the Paper, except incidentally, but most of them won't have even read it. But just before I got on a plane at Heathrow to come here, it became clear that there was a blow-up about Melbourne University and my event there. And what has happened is, because I'm sort of fairly impervious to abuse, because I used to work for a politician, I'm used to abuse, instead of abusing me, the people have abused Professor Louise Hitchcock, who is, I think, either the head or the deputy head of classics at Melbourne University, and she was deluged with abuse, accused of anti-Semitism, the most awful, awful abuse. And what's really annoying about it is her training is... Mine is more ancient languages. Hers is archaeology. She was actually working on an archaeological dig in Israel at one point when Hamas were raining rockets down in the area. And huge numbers of all the other archaeologists ran away, and Professor Hitchcock stayed there on the basis that, no, I think Hamas are lousy shots and they're probably going to miss us.
And now she's been accused of anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Give
Wow.
me a break.
Well,
Sorry, just quickly, I know we have to go, but are you worried for your security? Are you worried for your safety? Have there been threats against you?
Well,
or
the
protests?
university has hired security, so I'm working on the principle that they know what they're doing.
That's
so.
rock star stuff right there, Helen.
the second book of Helen Dale's Kingdom of the Wicked series is out now. Helen, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.